Hey everybody, it's Atheist for the Cause here with a article review, and I wanted to talk about this Washington Post article that says it's titled It's time to bust the myth. Most Trump voters were not working class. Well then, let me remind you, Nicholas Carnes and Noam Lupe, writers of the Washington Post. Allow me to remind you what writers of the Washington Post said back on November 11th. Yes, working class whites really did make Trump win. No, it wasn't simply economic anxiety. I mean, can you get, and this thing is super annoying, holy crap. Can you get more opposite titles? Or more contradictory titles? It's time to bust the myth. Most Trump voters were not working class. June 5th. November 11th. Yes, working class whites really did make Trump win. No, it wasn't simply economic anxiety. My God. So let's go over this article. Media coverage of the 2016 election often emphasized Donald Trump's appeal to the working class. The Atlantic said that the billionaire developer is building a blue-collar foundation. The Associated Press wondered that what Trump's success in attracting white working-class voters would mean for his general election strategy. On November 9th, the New York Times front-page article about Trump's victory characterized it as a decisive demonstration of power by a largely overlooked coalition of mostly blue-collar, white, and working-class voters. There's just one problem. This account is wrong. Trump voters were not mostly working-class people. During the primaries, Trump supporters were mostly affluent people. The misrepresentation of Trump's working-class support began in the primaries. In a widely read March 2016 piece, the writer Thomas Frank, for instance, argued at length that working-class white people make up the bulk of Trump's fan base. Many journalists found colorful examples of working-class Trump supporters at early campaign rallies, but were the anecdotes an accurate representation of the emerging Trump coalition? And let me just take a break here. The Washington Post writes nothing without pushing some sort of narrative, so you gotta ask yourself, why are these two so contradictory? And I think I have figured it out. Here, they were saying that working class whites, were responsible for Trump winning because basically the working class is uneducated and, Trump's a racist. So, it was a whole, Trump supporters were racist and uneducated. That's the narrative they were pushing. But remember, the timing of this article. Just recently, Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord, and now they're trying to say that Trump's voters are affluent. Those actually connect because you can try to paint the argument that the people who benefit from not being environmentally friendly are the rich. And so that it's actually the rich that are voting for Trump that are out of touch with the average American. And I think this is what they're going to do in 2020. They're going to point to getting the withdrawal of the Paris Climate Accord as some sort of rich move, and that paint Trump supporters as rich and well off. And that's where they're going to go. And then they're going to try to build a coalition of the working class themselves. And the battle's going to be, and they're going to have the poor on their side. And the battle's going to be over the working class people. So we'll see if that prediction comes right. There were good reasons to be skeptical. For one, Most 2016 polls didn't include information about how the people surveyed earned a living, that is, their occupations. The preferred measure of social class among scholars, when journalists wrote that Trump was appealing to working class voters, they didn't really know whether Trump voters were construction workers or CEOs. I want to remind you guys, you were the ones pushing this narrative. You know, Washington Post, you as much as anybody pushed this narrative. So why are you now admitting that you didn't really know whether Trump voters were construction workers or CEOs? I love how they say they didn't really know, but it was the Washington Post themselves that didn't really know and made the argument anyway. And remember, the New York Times, they were the ones that said they were going to rededicate themselves to the truth, to finding the truth, or whatever it was, something like that. Maybe the Washington Post should make that same promise to rededicate themselves to the truth. Moreover, according to what is arguably the next best measure of class, household income, Trump supporters didn't look overwhelmingly working class during the primaries. To the contrary, many polls showed that Trump supporters were mostly affluent Republicans. For example, a March 2016 NBC survey that we analyzed showed that only a third of Trump supporters had household incomes at or below the national median of about $50,000. $50,000 is pretty dang good, but that's the median. Another third made $50,000 to $100,000, which is, you can have a really good life on that amount. And another third made $100,000 or more. Which you can do a lot with $100,000 a year. And that was true even when we limited the analysis to only non-Hispanic whites. If being working class means being in the bottom half of the income distribution, the vast majority of Trump supporters during the primaries were not working class. But what about education? Many pundits noticed early on that Trump supporters were mostly people without college degrees. There were two problems with this line of reasoning, however. First, not having a college degree isn't a guarantee that someone belongs in the working class. Think Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. And second, although more than 70% of Trump supporters didn't have college degrees when we looked at the NBC polling data, we noticed something the pundits left out. During the primaries, about 70% of all Republicans didn't have college degrees, close to the national average, 71% according to the 2013 census, actually lower than the national average, so by 1%. Far from being a magnet for the less educated, Trump seemed to have about as many people without college degrees in his camp as we would expect any successful Republican candidate to have. Trump voters weren't majority working class in the general election either. What about the general election? A few weeks ago, the American National Election Study, the longest-running election survey in the United States, released its 2016 survey data, and it showed that in November 2016, the Trump coalition looked a lot like it did during the primaries. Among people who said they voted for Trump in the general election, 35% had household incomes under $50,000 per year. The figure was also 35% among non-Hispanic whites, almost exactly the percentage in NBC's March 2016 survey. Trump's voters weren't overwhelmingly poor. In the general election, the primary, about 2/3 of Trump supporters came from the better off half of the economy. Also, I'll just throw it in there. If you remember, Hispanics went with Trump in the 30%, which somewhere in the 30s, which is like about average for Republicans. So Trump did not lose Hispanics any more than any other Republican would have. And Hillary Clinton did really worse with blacks than almost any other Democrat, and Trump was about on par there. So and with women, Trump, he did slightly worse with women, I think, if I remember right. I'm just going off of memory, but he won white women at 54%, so he was in the general ballpark. Um, so, all these demographics that have been made up to say, oh, Trump is against these demographics, it all turned out to be bullshit. Hispanics win for Trump, women win for Trump around the same rate. Now they're saying that they were saying the working class went for Trump, like the uneducated working class, and now they're saying that it's actually affluent, rich people that went for Trump. So it's kind of funny how every out of their narrative that they were trying to push, literally like every group they mentioned came out to be like not vote at Trump less than expected. But again, what about education? Many analysts have argued that the partisan divide between more and less educated people is bigger than ever. During the general election, 69% of Trump voters in this election study didn't have college degrees. Isn't that evidence that working class made up most of Trump's base? The truth is more complicated. Many of the voters without college educations who supported Trump were relatively affluent. The graph below breaks down white non-Hispanic voters by income and education among people making under the median household income of $50,000. There was a 15 to 20% point difference in Trump supporters between those with a college degree and those without. But the same gap was present and actually larger among Americans making more than $50,000 and $100,000 annually. Here you can see the graph. Blue means high school education or less. Orange means some college, and gray means college degree. And as you can see, the splitting up by college education doesn't really get you very much. It's pretty even in when you're judging by income. To look at it another way, among white people, actually that surprised me a little bit, to be honest. To look at it another way, among white people without college degrees who voted for Trump, nearly 60% were in the top half of the income distribution. In fact, 1 in 5 white Trump voters without a college degree had a household income of over $100,000. Observers have often used the education gap to conjure images of poor people flocking to Trump, but the truth is many of the people without college degrees who voted for Trump were from middle and high income households. That's the basic problem with using education to measure the working class. And again, I want to remind the Washington Post what the Washington Post said around when the elections happened. Yes, working class whites really did make Trump win. No, it wasn't simply economic anxiety. That's your title. And by the way, there was like this whole analysis done. This was not just like, some sort of stupid opinion piece or something. This was based on an analysis at the time that they must have had prepared in case Trump did win. To look at it another way, among white people without college degrees who voted for Trump, nearly 60% were in the top half of the income distribution. Oh yeah, observers have often used the education gap. In short, the narrative that attributes Trump's victory to a coalition of mostly blue-collar, white, and working-class voters just doesn't square with the 2016 election data. According to the election study, white non-Hispanic voters without college degrees making below the median household income made up only 25% of Trump voters. That's a far cry from the working-class fueled victory many journalists have imagined. They're arguing that non-Hispanic whites without college degrees making below the median household income of $50,000 only made up a quarter of Donald Trump's total support. So, we continue. A recent National Review article about Trump's alleged support among the working class bordered on a call to arms against the less fortunate, saying that the white American underclass is enthralled to a vicious, selfish culture whose main products are misery and used heroin needles. Donald Trump's speeches make them feel good. So does OxyContin. And that the truth about these dysfunctional downscale communities is that they deserve to die. This is some nasty shit that was said about Trump supporters. And you want to wonder why Trump supporters supported Trump. This is what you were saying about them. It's funny because I fit into the category that they're claiming, and I've never used a drug in my life. I've never taken OxyContin. I've never used marijuana. I've never even smoked a cigarette. But yet, apparently, the group I belong to, we're all just OxyContin using motherfuckers that are poor and uneducated. This kind of stereotyping and scapegoating is a dismaying consequence of the narrative that working class Americans swept Trump into the White House. It's time to let go of that narrative. What deserves to die is in America's working class communities. It's the myth that they're the reason Trump was elected. And I agree. I don't think you can pin Trump's victory on any one group. If blacks would have come out to vote more in favor of Hillary Clinton, that would have helped her a lot, and possibly, I don't know if it would have been enough by itself, but it would have made things a lot closer. If Hispanics would have gone for Hillary, basically if the minority groups that were supposed to go, way in favor of Hillary had actually done so, and not just the percent, and had her not only get the percentages, but had her get the volume, because we saw a decrease in volume of minorities, not because they couldn't vote, because they didn't like Hillary Clinton, so they didn't come out. And in the Midwest, Hillary Clinton, she didn't try for the Midwest states in the primaries because she conceded them to Bernie Sanders. And then during the general election, she thought that she had them in the bag, so she didn't go to them. And basically, the entire cycle, she just ignored the Midwest. And why do you think you lost it? I mean, yeah, Democrats are going to win the Midwest if you visit at least somewhat. Like, usually, that's why you go during the primaries to the Midwest, because then you don't have to go in the general election as much, because people have already seen you and know your message. But if you skipped out in the primaries, then you certainly have to go during the general election to shore it up a little bit. Finally, I just came across another article that shows how this is on November 9th, how around the election time, where the Washington Post, another writer of the Washington Post, was really vilifying Trump voters and painting them as the uneducated, poor, working class voters, the opposite group that this article is claiming, and it's just more of a contradiction. And I just want to show, to be honest, I think this article is the most accurate of all of them. But I just want to show the nastiness and how wrong they were. And, this only comes from pushing a narrative. And if you were this wrong, why should we believe you in the future? But even this one, I think there is a narrative here, and it's not quite what they're making it out to be. But this is a lot closer to the truth than these other ones. So this is going to be, just get some popcorn for this one, folks. So he won. The nation takes a deep breath. Raw ego and proud illiteracy have won out, and a severely learning disabled man with a real character problem will be president. We are so exhausted from thinking about this election, millions of people will take up leaf raking and garage cleaning with intense pleasure. We liberal elitists are wrecks. The Trumpers have a whale of a good time waving their signs, jeering at the media, beating up protesters. By the way, these protesters were paid by George Soros that literally went and tried to start fights and literally beat up Trump supporters. But we'll just ignore, all the Mexican waving, Mexican flag waving Trump support or anti-Trump supporters. They weren't even like pro-Hillary. They were just anti-Trump. We'll just forget all of that. Where anywhere they went, there was massive violence. And we'll just forget all of the, the Chicago protesters that were literally paid for by the DNC. Project Veritas exposed it, where the Democrats have admitted that the Chicago rally for Trump, it was literally shut down by the DNC and protesters that they paid, chanting, "Lock her up." We elitists just stood and clapped. Nobody chanted "Stronger Together." It just doesn't chant. Do you think the irony? Do you think that they get it? Like, maybe it was a terrible message then? Maybe you should have come up with something that was more chantable? Like, Jesus Christ. The Trumpers never expected their guy. It's not our fault that you guys are incompetent on coming up with a good message that is easily chanted. I mean, you're not the victims of some message that couldn't chant. You guys created the thing. The Trumpers never expected their guy to actually win the thing. Yeah, we did. We really did. It's you elitists that were out of touch and didn't. And that's their problem now. Yeah, it's our problem now that, we got our president in rather than, Hillary Clinton, who probably had Seth Rich killed and has done a lot of terrible shit in other countries, including Haiti, especially Haiti. They wanted only to whoop and yell at boo at the H word, wear profane t-shirts, maybe grab a crotch or two, jump in the RV with a couple of six-packs and go out and shoot some spotted owls. Is that even a thing? Shooting spotted owls? It was pleasure enough for them just to know that they were driving us wild with dismay. But us, I mean librarians, children's authors, yoga practitioners, Unitarians, bird watchers, people who make their own pasta. Yeah, you guys are the only ones that makes fucking spaghetti. Opera goers, the grammar police, people who keep books on their shelves. That bunch. Because, yeah, this bunch doesn't include Trump supporters. The Trumpers exulted in knowing we were tearing our hair out. They had our number, like a bratty kid who knows exactly how to make you grit your teeth and froth at the mouth. What's funny is, like, I think she's trying to be sarcastic here, or I think he's trying to be sarcastic here. But this is like the most accurate statement. They're like the bratty kid that didn't get their way, the spoiled brat. Alas for the Trump voters. The disasters he will bring on this country will fall more heavily on them than anyone else. The uneducated white males. Oh, there we have it. They said it right out. Uneducated white males. There you go. Let me remind you, you Washington Post, what article you just came out with. It's time to bust the myth. Most Trump voters were not working class. Who elected him are the vulnerable ones, and they will not like what happens next. I don't know about you guys, but I'm loving. Yeah, he's right. We won't like what happens next because we'll love it. I've been loving what Trump has been doing. I mean, he's getting massive, like, record job numbers. He's doing everything he said he would. He got us out of TPP. He almost got us out of NAFTA and then said he would renegotiate because they were running to him to renegotiate it. Then he pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord, which I'm for, the environmental stuff. I'm for protecting the environment long term, but it needs to be done in an economically friendly way. And I think that even with the Paris Climate Accord, we can replace it with something better. The only thing is, I'm not sure if Trump will yet. I'm hoping he will, but we'll see on that. But otherwise, like on all this other stuff, there's not much I can complain about right now. I mean, he's destroyed political correctness to a large extent. A lot of this stuff where at universities where people are being falsely accused of all kinds of things. People have been attacked for being like Nazis and stuff, even though they're not Nazis, and all this shit. People, conservatives being deplatformed in universities. It's all being exposed, and this is going to have long-term ramifications in our university system, which is going to improve the country a lot long-term. Just issue after issue, I'm exceptionally happy with the what Trump has done. So we'll TPP he got out of any promise. It's almost like, there's almost nothing you can point to where Trump broke a promise. It's very hard to point to where Trump even broke any sort of promise where he didn't, like, okay, maybe he broke a promise on NAFTA. I don't even remember what his exact policy was, but if he said he would get out and he's only renegotiating it, well, I guess maybe you could call it breaking a promise, but only in technicality. Like, that's not really even breaking a promise if you change what NAFTA is. So I just thought this was pretty fantastic. They are switching, they're pivoting their strategy. They're in 2020, and even I can almost guarantee you this narrative is coming straight from John Podesta. Remember, John Podesta does work for the Washington Post. He or contribute to the Washington Post, and he even said, I don't have the article up now, but he said that Donald Trump has drawn battle lines for 2020 by withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord. So don't forget about John Podesta either. And it makes me wonder if Hillary Clinton is actually going to run again in 2020. But let's get through 2018 first. And even 2017, we have a couple of elections. I think Georgia's in 2017 yet. And Virginia, I want to say, one other state, we have a congressperson running. So, and then 2018, there's going to be a lot of congress people and governors. And then, 2020, I'm sure there will be a few in 2019, but then 2020 is the big one. So, anyways, have a good one, guys. I hope you enjoyed the article. Like and subscribe, and I'll be coming out with more, especially on the elections. I'm going to be doing more. So, have a good one.